outside about... Basically, we're going to talk about why we love Twilight. And Kelsey's going to be embarrassed.
That's so... I'm not embarrassed.
Okay.
I do love Twilight. I'm not embarrassed.
Okay, I've never seen Twilight, so explain to me Twilight.
You mean you've never read Twilight?
Twilight is originally a series of 3 books that were made into movies.
I thought it was 4 books for some reason.
It's 3 books, but they split when they made movies. They're splitting the 3rd book into. Or is it 4? It is 4 books. I'm sorry, it's 4 books.
I listened to them and I was like, I thought there were 4 of them.
There's 4 of them. It's about a young girl who moves to Washington to live with her father, and she meets a young man who's actually like a 100-year-old vampire that looks like he's 18, and his family of vampires, but they don't eat humans. They only drink animal blood because they're nice vampires. And the whole thing that everyone gets frustrated about is when they go out into the sun, they sparkle instead of,
straight up burning
to death. And she's kind of like me, where anything that can cause an accident, she'll find.
Yeah.
So she's very klutzy and finds trouble, and so Edward, her boyfriend, is always having to save her because she attracts evil vampires in dangerous situations.
What is the sparkling? It's just like what happens?
When they get into sunlight, they sparkle.
There's no special effect that is.
In the movie, there's a horrendous special effect, yes.
Yeah.
But
No. I mean, like
their skin shines like diamonds. It sparkles like diamonds in the sunlight.
Well, because a lot of times they like refer to it as like stone grandmother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. As long as it's not like something else.
I gotta watch this. I hear this Twilight though.
And the way we look at it is, it's the same way I look at movies or music or any sort of book or TV. It's totally personal, and we know that there's things wrong with it, and that it's not expertly written by any means. It's something that when you read it or listen to it or watch it, whatever medium it is, you enjoy it and it makes you happy. And it doesn't matter if it's not the best done thing, it's just what makes us happy.
We find it extremely interesting because, yes, it is that like romantic triangle that's been done a million times, but it's got a different turn on it for us because a lot of ways it's like how, like I said to Sharon earlier, how a lot of us related in high school to like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, or Angel, or Charmed, or something like that. It's something fantasy fiction that has issues that we're interested in and that we can get into. And so I think we've all kind of been there.
And that whole, I guess, the whole all-consuming love is kind of, it's something fun to read as a fantasy that, we were talking about, we love it, but we can definitely see problems with it. Like, I've always joked that if I was Bella and it was the real world, I would totally pick Jacob because he's not controlling. And I'm totally an Edward girl, but if it was the real world, I'd be like, dude, Edward, you need to back off, you're way too controlling. Like, just back off. And if my friend was dating him, I'd be like, honey, your boyfriend is way too controlling, he needs to take a step back.
So why do you think the book series, what made it so successful that it became such a blockbuster
It's so indescribable.
series?
It's just, when you listen to a song and you can't describe it, but you're just like, I love that song, and it makes you feel good, and you really enjoy listening to it. It's the same thing as I've read other vampire books, and I do love them, but there's something about it that's just, you can't put him down for us.
And I know, not to cut you off, but the main thing for me wasn't even necessarily the love interest or anything like that, because there's so much more to it and what they get involved in, what Bella gets into once she decides to become part of this vampire family, and a whole, bunch of shit comes at them from ancient.
You're late for the Twilight.
Vader head. That's real bad.
Jesse.
Not much.
But anyways, what I was saying is the crap that she gets involved in because she becomes a part of this family. It's really interesting and fascinating what they have to go through and who they get to meet and the different characters and how you see them play out and what powers they have. And there's a lot more to it than just a love story.
Another concept, Cole, is that basically if you have something really remarkable about you as a human, when you get turned into a vampire, that could be expanded into a power. So a lot of the different vampires have power. Like Edward, the main vampire, can read people's minds. And what? Jasper is another character in his family, and he can affect people's emotions. So he can make people really angry, or he can calm them down. He can make them horny if he feels like it. Like, he just feeds off of their emotions. There's evil vampires that can make you feel like you are experiencing the worst pain imaginable. And it's just, if you have something special about you as a human, that might then cause you to have a superpower, basically, as a vampire. Bella is immune to all of the physical powers, and they don't know why, but when she becomes a vampire, they discover it's because she basically has a shield and she learns how to push that shield onto her other people so she can shield them from other physical types of powers like the pain one and stuff like that. And that's why Edward can't read her mind, because she has a shield.
I got another question, because we were actually you're talking about the vampire powers. Vampires, werewolves, they both have, I mean, they're big motifs, especially in literature and any sort of storytelling medium. Do you think it's fair that certain rules or certain motifs of vampirism and how werewolves are depicted, how that's applied to Twilight?
Like how people say, oh, why do they sparkle? That's so weird.
Well, that's one example.
We were talking about that outside, and the thing that always makes me laugh about that is, yes, the classic depiction of vampires is they're scary and they're evil and they can't go out into the sunlight because it'll kill them or whatever. Vampire Diaries, which I've never watched, but I watched like maybe 2 episodes of, they have a ring. Like, they're a powerful family that has a ring that allows them to go out into the sunlight. But vampirism and, werewolves, fairies, all of that, as far as we know, that doesn't actually exist. It's all pretend and it's mythology, so I do think it's a little bit silly when people get so angry because it's wrong, that's not the right way it's supposed to be. It's a mythology, and there's really no definitive answer to what the mythology is because it's all pretend. And yes, we have the classic ideas that we have, but it's you can't really say that something make-believe has to be a certain way because it's make-believe.
And that's the part about writing a story is, yeah, you take maybe an unoriginal idea and you make it original.
Yeah, I guess nothing new in the sun.
Well, so why vampires? Why not fairies? Why not elves?
That's also been done too.
We were at a folk convention and a guy said the reason Edward sparkles is originally she wrote him, I think, as an elf, and or a pixie or something. And then the publisher said that's not going to sell, make him a vampire.
The only story I ever heard from her is that she had this really elaborate dream. And it was basically, if you've read the books or seen the movies, there's a meadow scene where they're in a meadow together. And in her dream, that's what she saw was a sparkling vampire, supposedly, is what she said. So that, according to her, it's just, she dreamed about it, and she dreamed about a vampire that sparkles. And so she created this book series about it. I also think, as silly as it is, they never have sex until they get married. And Stephanie Meyer, the author, is a Mormon. And so, of course, she's not going to write a book where the lead characters have sex before they get married. And working with teenagers especially, I used to work at Crosswalk, which is the homeless shelter for teens. Having a popular book series where the characters choose not to have sex, and it's a popular book series that's cool to read, is actually kind of remarkable, because you really don't see that, where high school age students make a decision to not have sex, and where religion isn't brought into it. They never say, I'm Christian, so I'm not going to have sex. You know that she's Mormon, and that's why her characters don't have sex. But there really are not that many role models, per se, for young girls that they choose to have sex. And in the books, it's actually Edward who's saying, no, we can't do this. I don't want to do it. And it is actually somewhat remarkable to have that out there for young girls. And the other thing I always saw that was amazing is, especially for, street kids or tough kids, whatever, it's really not cool to read. It's not cool to say, I'm going to stay in and pick up this book, and instead of going out on the town, I'm going to read this book. It's so not cool. But when a Twilight book came in, those girls fought over it. I mean, they typically didn't get into fistfights over it, but there was definitely a, oh my god, please let me have that book. And anything that could get those girls to read and make it cool was beautiful, because not reading Twilight when you're a high school student is kind of considered abnormal and wrong. And so it was almost like they had to read those books to be cool. And I don't care what the book is, anything that will convince a teenage girl, especially a troubled teenage girl, to pick up a book and read is great. And a lot of those girls were like, wow, this is actually really enjoyable. I'm going to read another book, and maybe I'll read this next book. And they realized that reading doesn't have to be what your teacher forces you to read. It can actually be something that... And there's totally stuff wrong with it, like how Sarah was talking outside. Like we said, you can... Reading it and watching the movies, we definitely find it. We don't think it's perfect. We find stuff that's wrong with it.
But we still love it.
We still love it.
Do you,
makes us happy.
Do you think the fan culture associated with this book series and the movies, do you think that's an accurate representation of the target audience for books?
They're young adult novels. They're meant to be young adults, older teenage girls. But I will admit that I read a lot of young adult novels just because I find them interesting and fun.
Well, I even got my mom to read Twilight. She loved it, so she doesn't normally read young adult novels that I know. So
I had an old roommate who refused to read those books because of I read them, the first one I read, Twilight, was because my mother worked in the library and she found this book series written by an author that takes place in Washington. And so she brought it home for me to read. And so I read it long before the like hoopla started. But I had a roommate who refused to read it because of that. She didn't want to. And so she wanted me to read a book series she loved. And so I was like, okay, I'll read this if you read Twilight. And I remember watching her and she would not put the book down. Like as much as she made fun of it and didn't want to like it, she fell in love with the series. So there's just something indescribable about it that makes it.
well, it's the same. I look at it honestly the same way that I look at Harry Potter. I absolutely love Harry Potter. I mean, it's obvious fantasy, fiction, young adult book.
As much as we would love to go to Hogwarts.
Yeah, and it's absurd, and I'm too old to be reading this book, but I don't care because it's a great book.
Yeah, Harry Potter is an 11-year-old kid, and I still reread the Harry Potter books.
Same here. Yeah, I've listened to I've got the audio of the Twilight, but I've only listened to them once. I don't know if I'll ever listen to them again, but I have listened to them once.
See, I don't expect everyone to like it. I definitely don't expect that. But it does, it doesn't make me mad, but I think it's silly when people will make fun of us for it. Or be like, oh my god, that's so wrong. Because it's like any medium of entertainment. It doesn't really matter.
But at the same time, we're still able to laugh at the stupid stuff. So.
I'd just like to state for a fact, I was asked to do the panel after you guys.
You're not going to offend us. It's okay.
I don't attack you guys.
You guys have any more questions?
I will make a statement. I have not read Twilight. I had a really hard time getting through the movie. The third one
I would say if you've only seen the first one, that doesn't count, because Catherine Hardwicke is truly a horrible director.
But honestly, not being involved with it, I'm pretty appalled at the Twilight moms. It's like if a guy were gaga over a character that age, who's middle-aged, my age, and say over Bella, to the degree some of the middle-aged women are over Edward and Jacob.
I don't.
Edward,
though, is technically like 102.
Yeah.
So he is not technically a teenager anymore.
Yes, but there has been one of the moms that has tried having Jacob sign her breasts. And
Yeah, I've heard some horrible. Anytime, I've heard of women that have tried to convince rock stars to have sex with their teenage daughters. Like there are mothers out there where it's just like
there's always kooky people out there. So
a joke I've always made is if you're a single man, honestly, especially if you want to date younger women, read the books. Because it's a really good way to pick up chicks. If you can say you've read the Twilight book, it's like they have the new American reunion preview out.
Now
we have
yeah.
Go to the bar with a Twilight book in your hand.
And you will get chicks.
Let's put on some glasses.
Yeah. It's a great way. Even if you just Google quotes.
Some glitter. Some glitter on there.
Yeah.
Just kind of.
Well, can I get some credit just because I know the person whose car is put up inside one of the stores in Forks just because it's so overwhelmingly cluttered with Twilight memorabilia.
What?
I will say I went to Forks with my friends and it was.
I wanted to go, but
it was an interesting experience, and I was able to make fun of some of the fans. Like this one girl that had a tattoo that covered her entire back, and it was like a scene from Twilight, and I'm just like, oh
really?
Honey, really? Like she had a quote from the book, and there was the whole apple scene and everything, and I'm just thinking to myself. There's something wrong. I can understand if you have a real emotional attachment, get a tiny little thing. There was this one quote that I think Edward says to Bella where it's something about you can never see the light if you don't see the dark or something like that. And it's basically to enjoy life you have to see the darkness. Yeah. And I can understand having an attachment to getting meaning from something about it, but to have an entire back piece devoted to it, to a book that's only been out for a few years, was a little bit ridiculous to me.
Good question. It seems like, particularly with certain things that become a phenomenon very quickly, something that becomes a pop culture icon, and we can attest to this. There always seems to be a subsequent backlash against it.
Yeah. The more popular something is, the more.
Right. What do you think about that in relation to Twilight?
It's the same way, like I said, with any sort of medium, when people make fun of people who like it or when people insult it. To me, there's music that I really don't like, and unless the music you're listening to is advocating, if there's a song that's saying, rape a woman, I'm going to have something against that.